everyone. Welcome to Fine Tuned. Today we have Ka Mok with me, who is technical product manager at IBM, and we are going to talk to him about his experiences with the latest stuff on AI. All right, welcome to the show, Ka.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So let's jump right into it. And you made the switch from a senior developer to a TPM on the same platform. I would like to first learn about your shift and the way you think about developer tooling that happened during this transition.
Yeah. So to give you a bit about my background, I started coding after college, and I was a self-taught software engineer. Prior to joining IBM, I was working as a consultant, doing software engineering for a few companies, and then I landed at IBM around 6 years ago. And the transition from senior software engineer to product management was really spurred by my desire to do more leadership work in the team. And it's definitely, we have a saying in IBM which goes, if you get a role, it's not like you weren't doing the responsibilities that you already were expected of you before you got the promotion and the title change, right? So I was always very passionate about interacting with our users, which in the developer experience platform, we have thousands of developers that use our platform. It's really just, I think, me being personable to the folks we work with, and my management team notices that, and I'm able to translate a lot of their pain points into features as an engineer, and that kind of helped my leadership identify me as a good candidate for this opening. But did you have another question around the
Primarily, what has changed in your thinking about developer tooling because of this transition?
To be honest, it hasn't really changed the way I think, because building tools for developers is very different, especially for an internal product like ours. It's very different than building for the external customers. To have very strict guidance around cybersecurity, around uptime, around reliability, because we have a global presence. We have a global team in IBM from India to US to Japan. It's around the clock. So in terms of that engineering rigor, it hasn't really changed that much. I will say being in a leadership position helps me understand a lot of the business decisions that are made. And I think that is something that I've enjoyed doing, and helping the business stakeholders get what they want with technology.
Interesting. I think that makes a lot of sense, because when you are building a product for developers, I think there's not a lot of shift, because if you're coming from a developer background and you are building a product for developers, it's more like, okay, you are your user. But
We
yeah,
are actually. We use our own platform to build our platform.
that's amazing. And when we look at products for external customers, or let's say in that sense consumer facing apps, then it becomes a different shift altogether. So I think what you are saying totally aligns with, like, there has not been a lot of shift because you are your own user. Totally makes sense. Awesome. Let's move on. You work on the developer experience platform at IBM, which is one of the largest internal CI/CD platforms in the world. How is AI changing the way developers build and ship on such a platform at enterprise scale?
Yeah, so at IBM, we recently released a coding assistant called IBM Bob, and it's really a hedge. It's a bet against providing our proprietary coding data to open source, not open source, and enterprise tools like Cloud Code and Codex and other tools that come from our competitors. So I'm happy to report that that tool is, I think, working on a feature parity basis compared to Cloud Code. Purely my personal opinion. The way that these tools are used amongst developers, though, I think that is still something that the industry needs to realize. It's that AI coding assist tools at best is only going to be a force multiplier for the staff that you already have. And one of the strategies that I think we've discussed is how do we, and this is not only from my team, but across different mentors that I have who lead bigger engineering organizations, how do you hire for a world where we're relying on AI coding tool to augment developer workforce? What does that shape look like? Is it going to be a pyramid like the traditional structure that we have for teams, or would it be a little bit more of a skyscraper?
Hmm.
I believe it should be. You still unfortunately require what we call steering
Hmm.
when we work with these AI coding assistants. So I personally haven't seen a good example where you can give an army of AI agents requirements and have it execute at a level that is satisfactory.
Hmm.
In my perspective, there is still a ton of steering and prep work that needs to be done before we can pass off requirements to our coding agents. So, in terms of, which is why I mentioned the org structure, and maybe we don't need to be like this.
Hmm.
We need to have this, and the reason it's not like this is because we still need a talent pipeline,
Yeah,
right? We still need a
exactly.
talent pipeline of engineers coming in and becoming those seniors 5-6 years down the line when the companies when those senior engineers transition off or they
Yeah.
retire. So I think that's really what I see.
Hmm.
AI coding agents changing the way our teams operate.
Yeah, I think that that makes a lot of sense. We are still early in this like paradigm, and with like there are two things happening in parallel. On one side, there are these AI agents becoming smarter and smarter pretty much every day. On the other side, like you have people still realizing that just like prompting is not enough. You need to have the right context, you need to have the right like understanding of what's going on, and you need to have the right knowledge to verify the output as well. So I agree with you that like we will not be at a point where we do not need more engineers. We will be at a point where there will be better like output coming out, because engineers will be augmented with agents in a much more smarter manner in the future. And on both sides, I think the progress is important. On human side, to understand how to use the agent; on the agent side, to like become more smart and less error prone to per se. And that kind of like aligns with how you are putting it as a skyscraper. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of how I see the future of software engineering as well in IBM and other
Awesome.
places,
Awesome. Yeah, I think that
depending on how you look at it.
that's fair. I agree with that. It has both sides to it. All
Yeah.
right. So you've written about the SBOM management and supply chain security at scale. I've read some of that. So as AI generated code becomes more common, and we have seen, like it's cheap to write code these days. How does that change the security and compliance picture on the enterprise side?
Yeah. I think I know what you're hinting at. So there has been a lot of stories on the open source community where the development teams who own certain popular products are inundated with by pull requests from AI agents, right? And a lot of times I think it's certain engineer wants certain features. They ask Claude to fix it, push a commit, and then they wait. Um, and I would say from an enterprise perspective, we have something similar. We have
Hmm.
inner source, which means internal teams within IBM who wants a new feature, who wants to do certain business activity, needs to modify some of our code to get what they want. And thankfully, when it's internally, this kind of behavior where it's kind of unwelcome, and I think it gets to the heart of AI coding, which there is a distinction between a developer that is using AI agents effectively and those that are not using it effectively.
Hmm.
Luckily, because it's internal, we are able to course correct any developers who provide low quality work,
Hmm.
and that helps the code review process go much faster, right? In the open source space, they have literally blocked down who can make contributions. We luckily haven't had to do that because the problem is that
Hmm.
severe. That will be some of the challenges we face too as uh, uh, AI coding has become more prevalent.
Yeah.
And in terms of security and compliance, um, which is what you were asking about, I just realized, luck, luckily haven't had, from my knowledge, any cybersecurity incidents that is caused by someone blindly approving code and leading to them inserting malicious code into our code base. And part of that is actually due to the work that we did last year, which is around pipeline gating. So I remember Log4j
Hmm.
was a vulnerability. I mean, there's so many vulnerabilities these days.
Yeah.
Log4j is probably the oldest one that's in my working professional memory. When a massive vulnerability is announced, the company's executives are freaking out, saying like, "Hey, how are we impacted by this? What do we need to do?" And the company has no data because
Hmm.
people weren't tracking that stuff
Yeah.
back in the days. On our platform, this is a solved issue,
Yeah.
right? Every single build, whether it is production and non-production, has an SBOM. We generate it with enterprise grade products that we buy from vendors.
Hmm.
We aggregate all that data, and within 5 seconds on a database query, I can tell you how many teams have installed certain versions of a package in IBM, at least
Hmm.
in the internal side. Let me give you a bit more context there. In IBM, we're broken up between software and external software and internal software. We call them products
Hmm.
as the external software. We're on the internal software side, which is more than 50% of the source code in the company.
Hmm.
So when a cybersecurity professional needs this information, they can get more than half of the company's relevant application through us, right?
Hmm.
So AI, thankfully, hasn't degraded our resiliency in this, but it's because of strategic investments we've made over the years that really hardened our development environment.
Awesome. I think that's a clear learning for everyone listening to us right now. If you are building security first,
Yeah.
then, uh, AI will not bring a lot of trouble because, when things become simpler and cheaper, things like writing code these days, it's easy to create a pull request. Anyone just wants to solve an issue by creating a quick pull request
Yes.
and leaving it for review. And that becomes a big burden for maintainers. That becomes a big maintainer for, product managers to, on one side they want to follow their roadmap, on the other side there are these random pull requests coming in. But if you are going through a security first approach, I think it's not that much of a trouble because you have already hardened the rules over there.
It's also I guess it's also not just the platforms itself. It's also the culture
Hmm.
that we have, right? Some of the challenges that I have right now with the newer hires in the team is I actually met I think every professional I've talked to inside of IBM, outside of IBM, is how do we instill the discipline that Gen AI kind of makes it easy for you to lose. So let me think that back in the days before Gen AI coding, when you encounter a problem, what's the first thing you do? You search for it on Google, maybe Stack Overflow. Today, you search on it through your coding agent, coding assistant, chat. We've basically shortened the feedback loop of
Hmm.
encountering a problem, looking for a solution, and then trying it out. Right. Back in the days, people still blindly copy paste code from Stack Overflow into
Yeah.
their source code because they were too lazy to bother to understand what was happening.
Yeah.
AI just made it easier. So in terms of like how do you make sure your quality is still up to, how do you make sure engineering quality doesn't suffer? It's a combination of the platform and also the combination of your engineering culture.
Yeah.
How do you hire? How do you look for these behaviors in an interview process? How do you stop it when it surfaces, and how do you
Hmm.
course correct it? And I think it's really something that we don't talk about enough
Yeah.
in terms of AI in coding, right?
Yeah, we have to start talking about hardening the platforms and improving the cultures because AI is not going anywhere. The pull requests are
Yes.
going to increase. Everyone is going to create pull requests here and there, but how do you take care of them? What's going to be your answer? How secure is your platform? These things are going to be important in the coming days.
To be honest,
Amazing.
we haven't solved this problem, right?
Yeah.
In terms of accountability, because it's such a nebulous problem to solve.
Hmm.
If a person creates a pull request on this is internal, right? On a code change, on a story, and you start reviewing it and you realize, there's a lot of mistakes here. How do you actually know that this person generated the code with AI or they were just sloppy, right?
Mm. Yeah.
It is an exceedingly difficult challenge to differentiate that. And what we've done on the team is, look, it doesn't matter what tool you use. Don't blame the tool. You're accountable for this output.
Exactly. Exactly.
and that's kind of the approach we've had and other teams that we talk to have. And this goes back to the culture, right? The technology problem is no longer about the AI output being inaccurate. It's about
Mhm.
the engineers utilizing these tools, having the discipline to take their time to understand what the coding assistant is doing, making sure it's not going to break anything else, because the AI coding assistant doesn't have the business context that you might do as an engineer, right? We have this idea that you can just give AI a Jira story and have it output code, and you review it, and it's productivity gain.
Mhm.
In reality, there's an exceedingly large amount of time that we find ourselves spending on writing that Jira story,
Yeah.
right? Putting that context that is not what you normally put in the Jira story, and having the AI assistant have that context and make the code change.
Right. Right. Awesome. Moving on, and this is more like, coming towards the productivity side of AI. So, when you're deciding what to build next for thousands of internal developers, how do you generate or how do you differentiate between genuine AI productivity gains versus the hype? Like,
Yeah,
what signals or what metrics do you look for?
I think this is something I think about a lot in terms of rolling out new AI features. That I'll give you an example. Some of the fun R&D work is automatic resolution of code vulnerabilities. It has to
Mhm.
do with the work we did on SBOMs last year. When you have a problem that is very clear, well, what might be very clear, black and white, like if does the code fix the vulnerability? Great, then maybe that means the feature is working, right? Um, when we examine the output a little bit further, we realize it's not as simple, because a lot of times just looking at a cursory decrease in number of vulnerabilities in our source code doesn't tell us the quality of the change that was made. So when we look into it, we realize that the AI assistant, and maybe this is a prompting question, right? It goes back to maybe we used a bad prompt. Now we got to tweak the different prompts to see if we can have a simple fix. Because actually, the point I was trying to get at is, at first you see vulnerability decrease, you can kind of consider that as a North Star metric, and you
Mhm.
have good outcome. But when you do a deeper dive on the quality of the code change that the AI assistant made, you start to uncover something different. It might be excessively modifying different areas of the code that's irrelevant to
Mhm.
the library that needs to be upgraded, right? There might be hallucinations that unfortunately our count of vulnerabilities decrease. Metric
Mhm.
doesn't help. And to be honest, this is where like folks have said we can use LLMs to judge other LLMs in this aspect. How you can use a different LLM to judge the quality of the fix, and it's something that we're playing with. So I think in terms of genuine productivity gains, the truth is we in the product in the vulnerability space, we don't really know it yet, because a lot of the
Mhm.
work we're doing is still pretty frontier, I would say. In terms of more generic uh, feature gathering, feature requirements gathering from our users, AI does help me like gather feedback from developers much more easily. We can analyze a lot of what people are complaining about in their various feedback channels that we have using AI. And um, let me think about how to answer this. I guess another signal that we do look for is we do a developer survey, technical survey every year, I believe,
Mhm.
and we ask about, and I can't tell you the results, but we ask about things like confidence in the AI output,
Mhm.
confidence in certain features. We ask developers themselves, how many hours of work does this really save?
Mhm.
And we try to be data driven in this matter, and we would measure the effectiveness of our tooling based on what their users are saying.
Mhm.
But we also are aware that developers themselves are not good at judging how fast they're moving through the AI productivity tooling. So we do have attempts to measure velocity across different organizations.
Mhm.
But as you can imagine, that is also another challenge in its own, right? Different teams point their stories differently. A
Yeah.
3 and 1 team can be mean to 5 in another. So the more I work on this problem, on how do we measure, like, how do we have an AI metrics that can measure productivity, the more nuance we find
Yeah.
as we do this work. Honestly, I think a lot of it is just being open to your initial assumptions being wrong. I've just literally given you 2 examples of metric that we try to measure, and then we realize, oh, this is not that simple. This doesn't actually measure what we wanted to measure. I think having the openness in the team and the culture, again, going back to culture, to admit, hey, we need to pivot our argument a little bit. We
Yeah.
can't just keep using this as a North Star metric. It needs to be a combination of things, signals. I think that's how I've worked. And it's something that you need to have support and trust within your team, because
Yeah.
admitting that the signals that you were measuring as a North Star metric is wrong, it takes courage, but it also takes a friendly environment to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Agree with you. And also, like it's extremely important in this time when we are still figuring things out. Like exactly like you said, it depends on what you are doing. If the AI has generated a fix for an issue, doesn't mean
Yes.
that it has not made something else, like bloated or weird or wrong. And the time is spent on checking those other things, running the
Yes.
entire suite, like doing a test is spent from the maintainer or developer itself. How do you measure productivity gains when AI is actually helping you save time on one side, but it increases your time spent on verification side of things? So
Exactly. That's
yeah,
exactly the problem we have. As and it goes back to your point, as AI coding becomes easier,
yeah,
the hard part of reviewing the correctness of the code hasn't gone away.
yeah.
We try to put an LLM on top of that to review, but
And
it
And the important part here is for everybody listening that we are not talking about open source software where you just put a disclaimer that, like you use it at your own risk and then you just dump everything in there. We are talking about enterprise software, which has, like a lot of security liabilities associated with it. So it's not you just vibe code a PR and put it on open source, give it a MIT license and say, oh, we are just do whatever you want. It's not that. It's some serious stuff we are talking about here. All right.
yes.
I think that makes a lot of sense, Guy. Very insightful. And one last question I have for you is what's the one thing about running a developer tooling at enterprise scale that people outside large organizations will be surprised with? What has been one insight for you that you think it's very interesting, but a lot of people don't understand this?
I don't know if this answer is specifically to like the large enterprise landscape, but I would say one of the things I learned when I became in the leadership position is the soft skills that you have that you bring to the table is quite important. Is usually more important than the technical work that
Hmm.
you do as an employee. People will remember the friendliness, the helpfulness that you provided when they're in their crisis mode, much more than the kind of technical brilliance that you might have on a day-to-day basis. And I think working at IBM, we are actually quite friendly. I think compared to most big tech that environment that I've seen and some startups that I worked at. And I think middle management has some strong influence here in terms of like the way you treat people and the culture you bring. It comes from the top, it comes from the leaders. So that'll be number one. It's enterprise that depends on where you go. Being friendly on a regular day-to-day basis goes really far.
Hmm.
The second one, I think probably the more technical differences between the large enterprises, we might know a lot more data points than a non-tech company and a non-enterprise. But having the vision to kind of piece it all together and come up with a narrative and a strategy to kind of propose organizational change, I think that is where a lot of the headache is, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a saying that goes, your engineering problems are mostly people problems. And for a large enterprise, it's not that we don't have a lack of data. It's usually we have politics between business units who might not want to disclose certain things because it might reflect poorly on how they operate. I think maybe this is not a surprise to a lot of folks who have worked in the big enterprises.
Yeah.
I think, but I do think working in an enterprise, um, we do have more specialization,
Mhm.
and there are people that you can count on. You just reach out to them on Slack, who you might not ever work with. You approach them with the problem, and they usually can give you a great guidance on how to achieve the outcome you want. And I think that's one of the joys of working in enterprise. But it all goes back to culture. You need to
Yeah.
have a culture where employees are free to be able to lend a helping hand across management structures, across reporting structures. And I think working at IBM, the people are really the best thing about working here. It's the willingness to help. And maybe that's surprising to certain folks who come from other FANG companies.
Yeah, I think it's also kind of like people always look at the tech side of enterprise.
Yes.
A lot of times, like when people outside of enterprises evaluate organizations and companies, they are mostly, like talking about, okay, they have produced this, like IBM
Right.
has just released pop, but people don't generally talk about how well their team is functioning, how people are interacting with each other, what's the culture down there, how they are security focused more than anybody else. These are the things that are definitely surprising to people, because people most of the time are looking at just one thing, which is the output produced in tech.
Or the stock price.
Yeah,
Or the revenue, the quarterly earnings. Yeah,
exactly.
it's some of these things that I guess, yeah, going back to your initial question, right? That was surprising to me that
Yeah,
there are so many indicators of how well a company is doing that is not on the financial analyst's report that you might see
yeah,
on Bloomberg or on your that you go, wow, they don't really fully have a good picture of my company. And if that's the case, maybe the reporting about another company might not be accurate either. uh,
exactly.
that's something that is, the more you work in enterprise, right, the more you understand that.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuance to it. So this has been very insightful. Thank you for joining us here, and lot of learnings here. Like, if you are using AI, you have to be security first. You have to think of the culture and bunch of other things. Thank you, Ka, for joining us.
Thank you.